No doubt by now you have heard or seen people talking about Clair Obscur Expedition 33, the recently released turn-based RPG from a relatively small indie studio, Sandfall Interactive. Now this is their very first game, and it's been popping off, receiving universal acclaim from both professional reviewers and gamers alike. It's already being crowned by review outlets as a top contender for Game of the Year. It boasts a whopping 97% positive user score over on Metacritic, along with having the highest PlayStation user score of all time. The game has also maintained a consistently high player count since its release, bucking the typical trend of declining in popularity after the first couple of days. In fact, it is still growing day by day over a week later, which is super impressive. And it sold 500,000 copies in the first 24 hours, then breached 1 million copies a couple of days later, and in the process is performing nearly twice as well as any other PC JRPG ever has in history. Now, in addition to the fact that this is a great game, much of the success is undoubtedly due to all of the positive impressions and word of mouth that you've probably undoubtedly seen out there. I can at least say anecdotally that is exactly what happened for me. I was playing other games at the time when Expedition 33 released, so I just assumed that this game would just be one of the ones that happened to pass me by, but I kept on hearing people talking about how darn good it was, so I finally decided I should give it a shot myself, and they were right. Everyone was right. This game is fantastic. And that is coming from someone who is typically indifferent to video game storytelling, but it's fantastic here, and also who usually doesn't care much for turn-based RPG combat, but they have a unique spin on it that I have really enjoyed. And I gotta say, from what I've played so far, the hype is real. This game is absolutely something special. So here are a few of the standout reasons, at least for me personally, as to why I think this game is doing so well. Yes, it's a top-line description. It is a good game, but here are some of the reasons and things that again have been highlighted in my experience. So top of the list for me is definitely got to be the combat. It is very engaging. Despite being turn-based, there's actually a lot of skill and precise timing involved if you want to do well. It is basically like a hybrid combat system. While the main top-line structure is turn-based, yes, there's this added layer of action blended into it as well. So you've got a team of characters fighting against one or multiple enemies at a time, taking turns based on the character's speed and other factors, like they have this whole first strike mechanic where when you're out exploring in third person or on the overworld map, if you hit the enemy before they strike you, you actually get to attack first in the turn-based combat once that pops up. And then from there, your team and the enemy go back and forth, taking turns, attacking, buffing, healing, and trying to avoid receiving damage. And when it's the turn for one of your characters, you're going to select from a range of different options. You've got a basic attack skill for every character, which will build AP being the resource that is used to cast most of your skills. And then there are the skills themselves, with every character having their own unique mechanics. Think along the lines of like traditional RPG classes with a range of different options, and based on what you unlock and equip from that character's skill tree, with the builders that are typically weaker, building up points, and then the spenders, which are more heavy hitting and cost more, mixed in there as well. You've got a variety of different debuffs, self-buffs, and setup for combo potential. Then there is also free aim, a ranged strike that uses 1 AP per shot, but in turn, it allows you to actually directly target specific enemy weak points. Oftentimes, yes, this will do a lot of damage, but it also many times removes some threat from the enemy. For example, like maybe you strike the shoulder of their arm several times, and as a result, blows their arm off, removing a massive form of potential damage that they could otherwise deal. And then finally, there are items which allow you to heal, restore AP to a character, or revive one of your down teammates. You're going to start off with 1 charge of each of these in every fight you go into, and then you get more of these as you progress through the game, unlocking more of them in the process. So it's your character's turn. You've got all of these different things to choose from, and like most turn-based RPGs, you're going to be doing one or multiple things on your turn, utilizing your AP resource with some larger strategic goal in mind. Overall, just trying to keep your team alive while setting up combat combos and maximizing the damage you do against enemies. Now, during your turns, many characters' skills also come with a quick time event where you'll have to time inputs properly in order to maximize the damage of your skills. So you're going to cast a skill, and then during its animation, you're going to either get one or sometimes multiple quick time event prompts to activate. There's a perfect timing window in there as well, which will boost the effectiveness even further. And this is the initial element of this turn-based game feeling like it has more active, actiony combat. But the real action, as well as the skill checks, come when it's your enemy's turn, because every single attack enemies do can be entirely negated if you time your response properly. So you've got three options here. You've got a dodge, a parry, and a jump. Dodge is the easiest way to avoid damage, having the largest timing window for success, but it comes with fewer benefits. So if your goal is to simply avoid being hit and taking damage 99% of the time, dodge is going to be the simplest, most straightforward way of doing this. Parry, on the other hand, has a much tighter timing window, but as a result, it comes with extra benefit of granting AP, as well as the ability to perform a counter attack if you get a perfect parry. And then for jump, well, this can only be used against very specific enemy attacks. They're actually marked with this jump flare animation, but it is the only way of avoiding those attacks, as you cannot dodge or parry attacks that have to be jumped. And it is these layers of defensive abilities that basically make the game feel like an action game for like half of the duration of combat, with the fact that the only way to avoid taking damage is by actually jumping, dodging, or parrying in response to enemies' attacks. And this happens fast. Like, you get a brief warning that the enemy is about to attack with a rough description of what they're going to be doing, and then you need to time in response to said attacks right before the strikes land. Like in any action combat game, you've got to perfectly time your parry, you've got to dodge right before the ability slams, you got to jump as the shockwave is coming. And this portion of combat, again, it feels like an action game. Sure, your characters are rooted in place, but the timing portion of it and the reaction to the enemy's abilities coming at you, that feels just like an action game. It's really cool. So yeah, this is a turn-based game in that on your turn, you have as much time as you want to select what and how you want to spend your action points. You're going to choose between, do I want to attack? Do I want to free aim for a weak point? Do I want to use one of my potions? Do I want to use one of my skills? And which skill do I want to use, considering the future line of skills that I'm going to use following this and try to set up combo and maximize damage or defend my team? But when it's the enemy's turn, there is no taking your time. You have to pay attention immediately and react instantly to avoid being hit. And the result is just this combat system that is way more interactive and skill intensive than what I'm used to experiencing in turn-based games. And yeah, I just love it. Like, it's actually been quite addictive gameplay. I find myself often sprinting from one encounter to the next because I enjoy engaging in the combat that much. And in the process, I'm leveling up my characters, I'm collecting resources, getting new items, getting new progression perks. It's just really, really good. I love the combat, hands down one of my favorite things. But also, there's the fact that this game actually has a legitimately interesting story, and I am the last person that you should expect to hear this from, because as a general rule, I am indifferent, to say the least, when it comes to video game storytelling. I just think that over the years, I've gotten so bored of the stories in most of the games that I've played that I feel like they're a waste of my time, and so I end up skipping them, with but a few rare exceptions. Like, I think a game like the original Last of Us was a great example. I was enthralled with that. A lot of times, I've just played so many games over the course of my life, and so many of them have just been not engrossing at all that I just get to the point where I end up skipping them, right? And as a result, like, story is at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to what I find value in from gaming, because if it was, then I'd be in kind of a tough position. I like the world immersion, I like really the gameplay, the progression systems, and just the experience of going through these virtual worlds. But the overarching narrative these games tell me, for the most part, I'm just not interested in. With this game, however, I can honestly say I actually feel invested in the story and in the characters, and as a result have ended up watching pretty much every single cutscene. The intro to this game, like the intro segment, the first like 5 or 6 cutscenes and the story, then some of the gameplay that happened, that whole thing, I legitimately was tearing up. Like, it was a very, very touching opening. just really, really good stuff. The story they are telling here and the delivery of it, not only from how characters are animated, but the voice actors as well, it's exceptional. Also, this really had me surprised. I want to point out the character facial expressions are some of the most realistic that I think I've seen in a video game. And no, I'm not saying that these are the best looking true to life faces that I've ever seen in a game, because this is still like a AA lower budget title. That's absolutely true in terms of fidelity or the realism, but it does have a nice look to it. I'm more specifically talking about the emotion that is expressed in the faces, the way they've animated these with just the smallest little details of how they react to what's going on, to the dialogue, the furrowing of a brow, the wrinkling of a nose, a tiny little smirk here and there. It is just all very well emoted, and I was very impressed, along with enjoying the storyline and the characters. Something else that I've really enjoyed in this game is their progression system and the character customization. It's actually a lot deeper than what I expected. So every character has their own skill tree from which you select 6 of the skills that you want to actively use at any given time. You can freely swap these once you've unlocked them, but at any point when you go into combat, each character can have up to 6 skills available to them. And as mentioned, all of these characters play quite differently. Beyond just their basic AP builders and spenders, which every character uses, there's a whole additional layer of unique mechanics for every character. So Gustav has this overcharge ability, an additional builder and spender system, where he's got weaker attacks that will build up his overcharge, and then once the overcharge is full, you can unleash it in a spender ability, which just deals massive amounts of damage. And then Luna has these resources called stains. They're basically like elemental charges with ice, fire, lightning, earth, and light variations. There are skills that will grant a different combination of stains when you use them, and then you will want to spend a proper combination on a follow-up skill that grants a big buff. So basically what you want to do here is you want to use skills that grant the stains that are set up for your damage dealing abilities, and there is a consideration with what you use and what you're going to follow it up with at a later round. Mayel has stances, reminds me of like a World of Warcraft warrior, for example. So she's got defensive stance where she takes less damage and gains extra AP on parries and dodges. Offensive stance has her dealing but taking more damage, and Virtuoso stance has her dealing exceptionally more damage but also taking exceptionally more damage, and the character is constantly swapping between these stances based on when they use an ability, based on the current stance that they're in. That's going to result in a swap to the opposite stance, or you want to set up for a swap into Virtuoso stance, immediately followed up by some massive heavy hitting ability before swapping back to another stance. And then finally there is Sayel, I think that's how you pronounce her. She's got the Foretell resource, which applies Foretell up to 10 stacks of these. They're like a deck of cards. You stack them as sort of a debuff on the enemy or a marker, and at the same time each of her skills will either generate a sun charge or a moon charge. And then what you want to do is get to the point where you have both a sun and a moon charge, which then consumes them and turns it into a twilight phase. This twilight phase lasts 2 turns, during which it doubles the effectiveness and the damage of all of her abilities, as well as the stacks of all of the foretells, going from potentially up to 10 all the way up to 20, making follow-ups to that even that much more effective. So yes, just like other turn-based RPGs, there is a whole builder spender system of AP. You use basic stuff to build AP, and then your better abilities cost more AP, and you got to consider this: how much do you want to use on a turn, on what abilities, in what order, and then how much of my AP do I want to pool, saving it for the following turn, which then, in addition to the more AP that I gain, will let me do some other big thing on that round. And on top of all of that, you've got all these character classes with completely unique mechanics to each of them to consider, with all their own skill trees and a bunch more. Because on top of all that, you've got the system of pictos. Now, these are items that you find out in the world, and they provide passive stats for your character, as well as buffs and modifications to all sorts of offensive and defensive elements. So you can actively equip 3 of these on each character, but then beyond that, once you've won a few fights against enemies, they become unlocked as passive abilities that every character on your roster can pull from, and all your characters can pull into these the same ability if there's really good ones, and there are some examples of that you'll use in many of the team builds out there. And that second half of the equation is a system that actually functions sort of like Warframe does, where you've got these passive costs for each of the abilities, like they cost a certain amount of energy, or luminas as they're called here in this game, and you have a max amount of that you can spend, and then you decide what combination of these that you want to have equipped to your character based on that number of that amount of energy. And that max number, by the way, can increase as you progress through the game. You're going to get more and more abilities to bump that max, letting having you have more of these equipped at any given time. And these Pictos have some rather significant effects that they can instill beyond the equipped ones having passive stat buffs. You got things like increasing damage of certain types by up to 50%, or granting bonus AP when certain conditions are met. That is a really good one, having your characters start with more AP or accumulate more AP during the course of combat. And then various ones that will apply buffs to allies or debuffs to enemies, and quite a few more. There's quite a lot of these Pictos to choose from and make your builds according to. There's just a lot to play around with here, and seemingly many different build setups and skill choices for different playstyles and different team synergy. Speaking of which, yes, you gotta also consider that you've got all these characters that have things and ways to synergize with each other beyond all of their own internal synergies. There's the cooperative synergies as well, and all of that plays into how you approach combat and how you build your characters. On top of that, the game's got a weapon system, so you're gonna find a variety of weapons. Each of the characters will use a specific types of weapons. Weapons will come with things like damage scaling, like you could have like a B or an A tier for strength scaling or something, which will increase its effectiveness. And then there are these rare weapons that will also come with bonus effects that you unlock as you level up said weapon. So yeah, the game's got a great progression and character customization system that I have also really enjoyed. Speaking of characters, this game has a lot of it, and I don't mean like individually named characters. I just mean the game has character across the board. It is oozing with character and style. First off, your team, their personalities, their mannerisms, the dialogue. This kind of loops back into the story narrative stuff that I talked about really enjoying earlier. The cast of characters in this game, they are all believable, they are all interesting, they are all memorable, and they have all been presented in a very, very just interesting way. Also, the world itself is super unique, and I'm talking both the visual aesthetic that the developers gone along with, but also the setting. It's like a nice twist on a fantasy world with a very French through line, as the whole world pulls inspiration from Belle Epoque France, otherwise known as the Beautiful Era, which lasted roughly from like the 1870s to early 1900s. This is a French development studio. They're making a game with a lot of French woven into it. Surprise, surprise. Also, the NPC characters, I'm talking about the like friendly ones that you encounter in the world. These have a lot of personality and charm. I specifically love the Gestrels. They're adorable. These little paintbrush-like creatures. And then even the enemies that you're fighting, the Nevrons, as they're called, this entire faction, they've got a cool look to them. In the way they animate, they've got some personality in there as well that's interesting. And then lastly, in terms of the world building and characters of this game, the music is fantastic as well. Shout out to the composer, just awesome job. And then the last thing I really want to point out is that this is a pretty straightforward and very consumer-friendly transaction. At $50, this is priced below many AAA games while being a superior experience in a lot of ways at the same time. That is very appealing to a lot of people, myself included. Also, no microtransactions, no season pass, no cosmetic item shop, none of that. You buy the game, you play the game, you enjoy the game. Thanks, nice doing business with you. It is a refreshing change of pace from the norm nowadays, from the all too common, unfortunate norm. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say? So as mentioned at the top, the result of all of these things and more is that the game is doing phenomenally well. They sold 500,000 copies in the first 24 hours, surpassing 1 million copies sold 3 days later, and that number is continuing to grow. This makes it, by the way, the most successful PC JRPG ever, doing nearly twice as well in its opening week as any other game in the genre before it. Everyone loves this game as well. Professional reviewers, it's got a 92 on OpenCritic, with 97% of critics recommending the game, and the gamers love it with a 97% Metacritic user score, a very positive rating on Steam at 93% currently, and it has the highest PlayStation user score of all time at a 4.91 out of 5. And then the player account. Now, the only source that we can track, of course, is Steam. No other platforms make their player accounts known, but on Steam, it has been maintaining consistently high numbers. In fact, it has been growing since release. Over the course of this past week, it just keeps getting more and more popular. In fact, as of the recording of this video, as of this moment, they just reached another all-time peak, having broke 124,000 concurrent players. We are over a week out of launch, and that number and counting, right? Like, it'll probably be even higher by the time this video goes live. That's just super impressive. I'll admit, this video is just like entirely boasting up this game but it's just been such a pleasant surprise. I will say that there are some cons. While overall this game is great and I've really, really enjoyed my time with it so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing to play, it's clearly a lower budget game. In fact, the estimates that I saw pinned the cost to develop this game at around $20 million. And you can see some of that in a few areas for sure. Like, there is is a lack of polish in some elements. You got a lack of freedom while exploring the levels. There's just like a lot of invisible walls all over the place, and the visual fidelity, some of the textures, and some occasionally stiff animations. But I still think the game looks great, and they clearly made the most out of their resources and the most out of UE5 with what they did in development. But yes, I could say that it still looks like a lower budget game because it is a lower budget game, and that's not a knock against it. And the visuals of games aren't the most important thing whatsoever. So the overall game experience, as I've covered, it's amazing, like top to bottom. I've loved everything about it. There was some slight annoyances in the gameplay rhythm though. So one big thing is if you die during a boss fight and you go back to the fight, you have to rewatch the cutscene. You can't skip it. You gotta like pause it and then hold down the button to skip it. But the fact that it still plays, like if I go to a boss, watch the cutscene, die to the boss, I should be able to approach the boss again without having to bypass and or rewatch the cutscene again. So that's stuff I assume that they may very well patch out in the future. So again, just a slight annoyance. But honestly, yeah, beyond those things, this is just a fantastic game, and it's, again, been a real pleasant surprise, especially considering that I almost skipped playing it. I'm glad that I listened to all of the word of mouth. I'm glad that I checked it out. So big congratulations to the dev team. For as much as I'm sure they believe in their work, there's no way they predicted the breakaway success this game has had. So round of applause, seriously, to everyone at Sandfall Interactive. Like, super great work. I'm sure your publisher is absolutely thrilled as well. And also, I guess, congratulations to all of us gamers, because, hey, we got another fantastic title to keep us entertained. And that's a good day. All right, that does it for today, guys. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the vid. I'll see you next time.